Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I think it was evident how disappointed I was yesterday when I found out and when Senator Campbell chose to remove the amendment. I have a grave concern on what this legislation means. And I said it yesterday, and I believe Senator Campbell when she says she wants to protect children, but I don't think she realizes the potential harm, the very real harm. We all have bodies, we all have journeys and transformations that we're going to experience in our lives. And it saddens me that we've decided to take an issue with something that is so very complex and probably beyond the life experience of anyone in this room. Parents and children make very many difficult decisions about what's best for their lives, and I know that if we choose to hone in on any one of those aspects, we might find ourselves similarly divided about what we think is right. And we're watching it happen in a few ways as we speak. Yesterday, it was brought up that there was no science. And I have to scratch my head at the number of doctors, therapists, and even one bioethicist and what they were referencing to in their testimony in committee and the subsequent conversations I've had with them. Members, the World Professional Association for Transgendered Health has been publishing standards of care for the transgender community since 1979. Those standards of care are over 260 pages in a font so small that most of us would need glasses to read, with 80 of those pages being solely dedicated to scientific citations. It has a chapter dedicated to the standards of care for children, another to adolescents, and it's not for the purpose of preying on them or recruiting them, but in order to have a very real conversation about the unique development and gender-affirming care issues of adolescence and the developmentally appropriate social and therapeutic practices recommended for children before puberty. And I know that those who have been to medical school are intimately familiar with the concept of do no harm. In fact, we spoke of this, and that was the genesis for the amendment that would have grandfathered those young people who are currently under treatment. And despite that work, it surprises me and it shocks me that this amendment has been withdrawn. And I worry about the harm. I understand that last Thursday night, Dr. Campbell and Dr. Oliverson released a joint statement, and I quote, "Yesterday an amendment was offered that would have allowed children already taking a puberty blocker or cross-sex hormone for a prolonged period of time prior to this bill becoming law to remain on their current treatment, thus grandfathering them." As two physician lawmakers, Senator Campbell and I have always endeavored to follow the science on this complex issue. This has sometimes proved challenging to the lack of high-quality studies in this area, especially the ones confirming the benefits of these treatments in children. Also, we would find that no studies providing guidance on the effects of rapidly withdrawing these medications from a patient. Thus, we felt as though this was wading into uncharted territory and that the likelihood that the placebo effect alone would dictate that the rapid withdrawal of medication that a patient believes is working would likely lead to a worse outcome. End quote. I applaud the statement that you and Dr. Oliverson put out because I believe you were right. Because I also believe that these bills will do some harm. I think that we know that talking about these issues on this stage in this way, so publicly, does harm. The Trevor Project reported that after our never-ending sessions of 2021, that more than 2/3 of the LGBTQ plus youth said that recent efforts by states to limit the rights of the transgendered and non-binary people have negatively impacted their mental health. That's not just trans kids, that's everyone in the LGBTQ community. So if we want to speak specifically of the harm of this bill, we should talk about it. So what happens when a young person stops taking hormone replacement therapy? There is not a lot of science here, but it would not be ethical to experiment on people this way. In fact, we hear testimony on how abrupt end of treatment negatively impacts folks from their bodies to their mental health to suicide ideation. And members, I hope to God, I pray to God that none of you ever have to hear from someone you love that they have considered or that they have attempted suicide. I hope you never have to experience that. We can, however, look at how suddenly stopping hormones would affect any person because it's actually normal to take hormones for a variety of reasons. To simply boost energy and mood, and that's why any one of us can walk into a store and buy a testosterone booster today. There was a Women's Health Initiative study published in 2002 that touted serious risk of harm for women in menopause taking hormones, which caused women to stop taking them in troves. Research studied and reported the participants' experiences and found that 1 in 4 women who stopped taking the hormones restarted because they reported having severe symptoms affecting their quality of life. Women on menopause who take hormones were about 20% more likely to be employed and scored on a higher quality of life scale. Cisgendered women who also take hormones, as their levels can drop so low that they can see serious changes in their motivation, their metabolism, headaches, fatigue, and more. All major American medical organizations have come out in support of gender-affirming care as evidence-based and medically necessary, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the Endocrine Society, the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association. All of these organizations combined represent over 500,000 highly trained medical and mental health professionals who are perfectly capable of navigating the science. So if we don't want to look at Europe's example for universal health care, then I don't think it's fair to cherry pick studies that less than 2% of the population. We have for over 30 years of experience providing puberty blockers for gender-affirming care. For Senate Bill 14's testimony, we had 300 people, trans, allies, all Texans, attesting to just how life-saving this care was for them, for their friends, and for the community members that they love. And members, actually, we had people flown in, witnesses from Indiana, from Utah, just to find incredibly rare detransitioners speak against this or for this bill. It's very disturbing how we tout America and Texas' unique power and insight, except when it doesn't further serve our agenda. So we have established that hormones are not something unusual, fringe science. I'd like to speak now to what trans children were experienced with the passage of this bill. We know gender-affirming care is life-saving care because suicide is the second leading cause of death in young people, with the first being gun violence. We know that trans people who receive this care have a better mental health than those who are denied care. One study stuck out to me in particular, showing that teens who had access to puberty blockers and hormone therapy were 60% less likely to experience moderate to severe depression and 73% less likely to contemplate suicide or self-harm. Detransitioners that have been brought up are very rare, with only about 8% of the people who've ever transitioned ever go through detransitioning. People detransition for many reasons, including temporary ones, like to have children, parental pressure, or to achieve another specific goal. The study I'm referring to was published in the American Academy of Pediatrics, and it found that the thousands of transgendered people, including 2,000 detransitioners, only 0.4 detransitioners reported doing it because they were no longer transgender. When I look at all of these bills and the concerns that motivate them, I struggle to string together the big picture. With Senate Bill 14, the proponents said that our children and parents are being manipulated by medical providers in order to coerce them in order to transition. We're told it's to protect the children. Last session, again, a few weeks ago, we passed legislation banning trans people's participation in sports. Last session, K-12, this session, higher ed, along the premise that trans people are stealing spots from women's sports and hurting women. We told that it's to protect women. In all of this testimony around the anti-trans and LGBTQ legislation that we've heard in committee, many supporters have used words that are not, I think they're not just awful words, but they're not fair. They describe people as pedophiles, as predatory, as perverse. But yet we're asked to protect society. Who are we protecting? It seems like it's a moving target with this legislation. But what is clear to me is who we are targeting. This session, over 100 bills have been filed in the House and the Senate that address the needs of the LGBTQ community, yet we choose to give the stage to the bills that exclude them. If it's fear of the unknown, let's talk about it. If we don't know how to address the changing world around us, let's invite the change to the table and let's set a path forward. What I can't stand for is the rhetoric and the narrative that we are painting about a very, very small group of people, many of whom are not in this room or with access to the microphone. And sometimes it feels like they're an easy target. I would like for the children, and received a text message from a parent this morning. The children who are watching, the people who are in this building to know, I see you. Please know you have a lot of life to live. There are many people who love you, and you have much growth ahead of you. And what you need for you to continue is to let your light shine in whatever way it is possible. In your home, in your school, with your friends. Please don't let this or anything we do in this building discourage you from flourishing. To the parents who are watching, we know you're not perverts, you're not pedophiles. You're parents who love your children, and you're doing the very best you can to keep them safe and to let them know that they're loved. You're doing what any parent would do, helping your child find themselves. How do you deny them when they tell you who they are? I know that on all sides of this issue, we want the future of our state to be here for that future. However, members, my colleagues, I want to share with you that quote from the parent that texted me today. They said, "You don't have to support trans kids or believe that dysphoria is a legitimate medical need. You don't need to like me or respect me as a parent, but you must not infringe on my right to get care for my child that we, and his team of world-class physicians know he needs, especially if that has been working for him, allowing him to enjoy a successful academic and social life for years now." This parent said to me that probably for the next 2.5 years, a family that's been here for generations in Texas will need to move out of Texas for him to continue getting his health care. Members, I know it's obvious that I'm going to be voting against this bill, but I want you to know that I believe it undermines the sanctity of the relationship between a parent and a child, the doctor and their patient, and any person's God-given right to their pursuit of happiness. Thank you for indulging me, and thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to speak against this bill, which I know that your goals are, you have the right goals, but this bill does the wrong thing. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Eckhart, what purpose?